Good morning, Geshe and good morning, Katrina.
Oh, good morning. To
Good
see.
morning. Very lovely to see you again. Thank you so much.
More than Sarah. What it, huh? Mission do I call it Junjaba, Conjusion about the Stinsi, Wombushi, Rapsi, like Yan Shubadella Charge. Oh, yeah. Kasota. Oh, Simja Tamja turned to Tumagera. Junkusi, and then Kundange. Landor Kenya Maluba Singing, Sinja Koma, Chineja Tobarsha. They said with their top jiggy. And it's just Yamdo. Gulu Chanju Gisam said, Chanju said on December shows. Oh,
So, here to begin with, we should think the one who is able to achieve the aims of all sentient beings, one who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities, who knows all of the points to be adopted and abandoned. This is the kind of state that I wish to achieve. And for that purpose, I'm going to listen to the Dharma. So, setting that motivation of bodhicitta, we should listen with that kind of intention.
yeah, tying as a day in Ba. Niba Tailan Kaka said to Redwa. Oh, Kalun Samgi, Yansichima Gurumaneba. Tailan Kavara. Onju go one lun Samgi, Yansichime Nikula Nugmares. Adeliha. Ralupa Shesarwa. Tandida. Tatilan Kakbatredwa. Oh, that's Nibatelian Kakbanesa. Oh, that was it. Telian Kakbanes, oh, did it. One good to be Kibu Yansi Chimmer, Doa Mebarta Sigara. One top Sangi Kibu de Yansi Chimmer, Doa Mebarta. And they shandona draw a Chibapo, Kibute, you shandon draw down, you shandon draw down. And you shandon son in Migo, Bona, Bola Soba, Suit, Tatubala Soba, Tende, Chebe Tende, Roa, Judisigora, Sham Tende. Cheba Migla Soba in last, any Migo on Bona, Bonabutu, Migte, Sula, Tanyan Chigordo. Oh, Tende Cheba never Kankata, one go jump Sarasigora. Cheba Mila Soba in la Cheba Jenny, Maton, Chodan Shema in Belele, Kevar Jushesa. Oh, Tito, yeah, Maton, Chodan Shema in Bechawacha, Chodan Timber, the Chodan Metimbe, oh, Tezulitan, Kevar Jushesa. Maton le wangu shikbar chebes maton le de wangu shiksade ta shiksana ani wangu top sange kansa de mi ta ya da chawa che to kang me ba de do ras te sigdwa maton shiksere do ame se de do chawa ti ta de chi de do da tok de cheba yi tene maton wale jo se sa ke wa chi ne chi do yu chen shen do ala soba. And if you talk about them, you want now watching all the sober to do Chawachi, but to Kangasura. Do not talk that Cheba Yense. Tell him Maton Valley, tell Maton Lele Tennis Suarese. Maton Ade, one go trouble tennis 600. Ten that is Kanga Chawa machine get into this. This is the what is Kuna.
So here, picking up in the text, we are on the page 461, which is refuting the reply to that. So again, we're on this point of refuting someone who would assert that just by a ritual empowered by a deity, one is able to cut the continuum of taking rebirth. And so here they are coming back, the opponent, saying that it follows that a person who has obtained empowerment will not have future rebirths. Because when a person moves toward some object, the basis of their movement toward that object and their cognition of form, etc., is visual activity. And so here, that activity will arise from the dharmic and non-dharmic action of the unseen. So here, again, the way that the opponent asserts is that all of our sense powers, our ability to see form and hear sounds and so forth, our mind being drawn toward an object, that comes from this sort of the unseen, the actions of the unseen. And as it is the case that the empowerment or this ritual empowered by a deity would then be able to destroy that unseen, thus you can get rid of all of the kind of activity that comes from that. So they say, and the action of the unseen is destroyed by empowerment. So there is no movement. And so here again, this is the opponent. Then they are saying that the power of our sense bases, like the sense powers, then giving rise to various visual cognition and audio cognition and so forth, is coming from this activity of the unseen. And because that activity can be stopped, can be destroyed by such an empowered ritual, thus you can get rid of that kind of the various activities, cognition of form, etc.
Oh yeah, ne. Tanda Tanzania Sulab Gora, Tandanga Mata. Tena Lega Dagi, Yunden Duchi, Duchi Yingis, King Dube, Sembamendo, on a less atia, Migi Tawada, Amjo Turbada, Draw out, and that's how I can get the less cigar, Mado Kiran, Sembasi, Kiwada, Miguel, Lumatanaba, Samlatan, Sembatilla, less sigma residua. Oh, tena duchi semba means, tena lega tag yunden duchi, tag yunden door sheba, miwana, chawa sheba, tezo less mato chig, kerang dube, number dube, semba kimigi, shawala tambufa, semba chingeti, sembe less, chelani, ludanga chawatelia, lunga less yora, oh, titanga maresigua. Oh, tena duchi semba means. Lega tag yunden duchi ingi ken dube samba mino shenas o tiba do tando kondu sheba dati tangje doba de sigdo.
So here, then this is again the assertion of like a Samkhya opponent who is saying that this kind of activity of our sense powers being able to see form and so forth is something that is arisen from the unseen, and this is what this kind of activity is what we would refer to as karma. So thus, the karma is a formation of qualities of the self and not, as you have asserted, intention. So here we have above seen that the Buddhists asserted that karma is actually that intention that then propels us to engage in activities of body, speech, and mind. And they are saying here, well, that's not the case. We see that they are asserting that there's this kind of unseen that is able to create actions, the action of seeing and hearing and so forth, that isn't, they would say, that intention. And so thus karma is a formation of the qualities of self and not, as you have asserted, intention. So reading the root verse, you may assert the basis of movement and cognition is the senses, etc. That activity is from the unseen. Because the unseen is destroyed, there is no movement. Thus, karma is a formation of the self, not an intention.
Oh yeah, Tara Lupa Tilia Lanchigua. Cheba Sura, Chawa Chengeki, Migo, Bonayo, Bola Soba, Sula Tawa, the Tranyan Bola Soba. Cheba one so near to Keba Las, Cheba one so, you be near to Keba Lasera, Kevalemba Lasegordo, Loxe dance, Chinjulo to Sebe Sebada. Sunday, you lost sympathy, pen dog, and you bet Tongi. Oh, Teneseba La Soba, Chinjulo Sheba, Yang, Give Sheba La Soba, Tezanyam do Yungi, Ted Chawa did not tell a Sembergen Gengi, sympathy, pen dog, and you bet Tongi. Kevalang Balasigordo. Nuba Tongi, Choga so shaggy my imbartase. Oh, Tene Onju, one tobala soba, Choga so shaggy my imbartase. Tetan pen doji do Yeba, maybe Cheso, Judo Chibe, or Le Sebe Wangi, Le Sanity, Kidik Wangi Cheso, Judo Chibati Wangi, Kyo Sangi Langare Sigurdo. Wangur toba teda yansi chime yansi chimar chime do den do arta wangur topsana kerangi to chima dugumare le ke cheba kanga chomsare sawate digmare sigora wangur toba teda yansi chimar chime do wang topsana tande kawalanje ko kurgere sigora kuzen chime do den dugere sigora do arta te kyu manyambara te gyu manyambar yubeshe te gyu manyambar duwa tangzi yore te wangile sagi yore ani seba dedi yordo o te chi gyu na te tsawa de tiri dwa yodan mebe chinju chiri si dwa sebe wangile sani te yobadan mebe chisu juni kiwa langire se cheba kela loye minse o cheba kela loye minse nutun shenji mayina te yodeda chi mindro se Tatunda leda nyumubala soba oti mabamba yoba tesido kwa chimachi medrode dugdese tene wangu achamji nubatu chamtuk marese atandure tsawadi chituna.
Oh. So then our own system responds to that by saying that we see that intentional minds concomitant with distorted cognition and craving are capable to assist in the generation of the activity of the sense faculties, etc., in the womb. So we see that that wrong kind of craving, when we have that sort of intention, that is able to assist in taking rebirth, in propelling a being into taking another rebirth. And so, out of that kind of craving and distorted cognition, one then engages in various activities, and those karmas then lead us to take future rebirths and so forth. But it follows that rituals, etc., other causes do not have because only those intentions are proven by positive and negative concomitants as existing as assistance when present and not existing as assistance when absent. So we have seen that when that kind of distorted craving and the kind of distorted these intentional minds concomitant with distorted cognition and craving are present, then that can lead to taking a future rebirth. But it's not the case that one is able to prove that those kinds of actions can be destroyed out of a ritual empowered by God. So, how can those empowerments one has obtained not lead to future rebirth? Because there's no reason why you wouldn't continue to take rebirth. It follows that they will lead to them because that cause of rebirth exists without having been undermined. So it is out of having, we with our consciousness, we engage in various intentions, those karmic acts that then cause us to take rebirth again. And so, so long as one has not abandoned karma and the afflictions, one is going to continue in that cycle. There's no proof that a ritual empowered by God has the ability to then act as this assistant or not be an assistant when present or absent with the kind of mind that follows after it. Whereas we have proved that concomitant with this intentional minds that are distorted cognition and craving. So the root verse then reads, we see that minds are capable in the generation of activity, but other factors are not, like a ritual empowered by a deity, because of concomitants in cases of existing and not existing. How can those not lead to rebirth since that intention exists?
Oh yeah, tada lupa tabachidwa. Wangur gi yilu neba chomba metes wanju go wangu adiga yilu neba chomba teg mares ane te da haja tagres te nerwa ane ta dagba cheba bor rongi mares ya tanjar sumgi konde shedwa ta tambu de ka sore wangur gi yilu neba chomba metes ya derwa ranglu pala gudwa o tene kare kede lokse te da wangi yansi chima kebe Nuba mebar chebe sherse, Tatambu Kurang deba shegura. Logbe sebala soba chinjilo de shebe, sebala soba tedagi wangi, yansi chima kebe, Nuba meba chesa res, wangur tegra. Wangur toba de yansi chimali kawaling marese, Debas were the Shenas, Taranlupa Lanch and Dimas. One good to be given to that Shans, or Tandati Tama Zawadi, Kedita New Mina, said the Vasawa. One good Chabati, Joachimale, and never never so sorry, joining my race, Zawadi. Tadil Ralu, one good to be given to that Shans, one good so, Jamata, Ranju Jesembe, Wangi Migla Sokwe, Wambu Yu Rangar Jimbatas. And one good top sangue dig any Gazode. One good tomata, but the Ranju Jesembe Wangi, Samlutan, Mig Pata, Amjonia, Tendetia, Kangamere, Sarbesigora. One so Jamata Ranju Jesembe Wangi, Mila Sok, Wambu Yula Rangar Zimbata, Patu Ten, Kanjumachitase or Jebata. Debe Yula Chetatum Jobata, could Debe Yuli Chatum, Shutum Kalasha Kachun Tazul Jojo. And you shanda shando young bata, Chesu Timbe, Genges, and you shanda shando young bala soba. Teda Chesu Timbe Gengi, Tedangog, Chesu Timbe, Kimbe Gengi, Yantin Gogwada, Kashil Madoj, Kashandra, and Ten Gogwa Mebon Yuatas. Teda Chebe, Simbe Nuba, one good get some better. Simbe Nuba Chomsara, leg Nuba Kanga Chomsara, and it's our Chetu Marwas or Takanga, one top Sasuna. Jumbechers. The Tangma Dirta. One so Chamata de Simbe Wang Zindan Ju Yingdan Gopa Meber Jurus Sawatere. One Jugo Wangu so Tomata by Chamata by Kansa Sumbuti Inaya, Simbe Wang Yu Zimbata Tanyambala Sobarang Chavalia, Shanda Shala Yangbada, Yanti Pango, Netimazu Shanda Juba to the Meber Juasasidwa, Tagri Yana say Ying Dang Gopa Meber Jurusatili, Dreba Japna de Yana did Jamna Degresura. Ying by Genes, Ying by Suru Yang, one good tops and the Kasangazi Kendoata, Yatsu Sune Kalikali, one bulla soba to Tamba, Nibala soba, or Tezo Mebertas, two one good never can get some services. Ying my Gene, one bull Yula Mijuk Bada, Goba Tabji. Lara Serba was Tezo Meba Tagris, Ying Dang Gogwa Meban use, all this couldn't out in him do this one.
So then we turn to the next point, which is disposing of the attempt to damage our refutation. And so first is the unacceptability of the idea that the power of mind can be destroyed by an empowerment. And then the extreme consequences if that were the case. And finally, a permanent self's unsuitability as a creator. So first is the unacceptability of the idea that the power of mind can be destroyed by an empowerment. So here, the opponent then claims because the empowerment has rendered those distorted cognitions and craving powerless to generate further rebirths, one who has obtained empowerment does not take rebirth. So again, they would assert that due to the power of an empowerment, you could get rid of all of these minds, these distorted cognitions, wrong cognitions, and render them powerless. But the response then to that is, it follows that those persons who have obtained empowerment immediately upon empowerment will not willingly apprehend objects of the visual and other faculties, will not relate specifically to a desired object, and will not mentally wander from object to object or stop wandering through the appropriate conditions, all of which actions occur by virtue of intentions in the person's own mind stream. And that's because the power of the intention that so act was destroyed by empowerment. So here, it should be the case, if it is that an empowerment has the ability to destroy the power of mind, that as soon as one has obtained that empowerment, the eye's ability to see, to take a visual object, or our ability to hear, we won't be able to engage in those objects because immediately upon attaining that empowerment, one has lost, or that empowerment destroyed the ability of those minds to relate to an object Or, for example, do you have the mind wander and then, due to other conditions, an intention come back to a specific object? So again, this is if one asserts that an empowerment is able to destroy that ability of mind, then these kind of wrong the consequences will follow. So alternatively, one could say one will not, because of the empowerment, encounter a situation where the sense faculties at first cannot relate to their objects because one is overly distracted, and then are restored to their objects by means of an intention that ends the distraction. So again, if the ability or the power of mind has been destroyed through that empowerment, you couldn't have a situation where you were distracted and then, say, brought back. Your intention was restored by, say, having mindfulness and so forth, because all of those the power of that intention has been destroyed through that empowerment. So the verse reads, if you say that empowerment renders those powerless, we reply, those who have been empowered immediately upon empowerment will not apprehend, relate, wander, or stop vis-a-vis objects, all of which actions are by virtue of intentions.
Oh yeah, Taniba Hajan Tower Redwa, Nangba Hajan Tower Tangadwa, Tambu Koran Dova de Sulabguare. Chidi Shiva te lo maybe se kore lo maybe says kore chunamjan join Miguro Shenas. Or Shiva te se wongur top sange kansade, Shiva te se no lo maybe sasare. Tadi loss the control dangazulo nitas domado, lo am chambo sange de pajo yusu shar. Any use are the two now, Kibula Lens and Genge, or teach our Singeti or Marisigora. Shiva te se lo maybe. Lo maybe Shiva te se lo maybe se lo maybe lo yamare se te maybe che kore chunamja jungar mingyo so kore so yangja kewalanga de jungumare se gora ta te tawa de teredwa chi de te lo me ser mingyo se lo yamare kewachimala jungumare se ta del ralupa kakachigdwa 원gur toba shigame chige doshala sokba timanam choja 원gur top sange shigame ani kansa de kyoje ne doshala sokba simji timata da shoshanse kyoje lo ringda chima cham chorde se mewa nawala sokba da yiji shebala sokba to tuni yangya kyawala ni do de se yorda kyoje yiji shebala sokba kyoje lo ringda chima cham chorde Sheba de Ringda Shima Junior, Quakia Langadesa. Tengu Neva, Tommy Sama, Tengu Sama Dede or Esgora. Caresana Tenam Ringda Shima Samsura Neva, Wangurge, Chombe Meadows or Taraluga, Tamade. Tengu Neva Tommy Chagna Yor, Seba Yor, Layor, Kangate or no, this you are not Ralupa Laura. Timanam Jolo some Jorgrisha. Tatali Atsu Lanjagdwa. Tenam Ringda some Jora Neba Ongurge, Chombe Medo, Shenas, Ote, Ribane Riba to the Yanjakalan and Drago Marte, Wongugi Chomsares, Tenam Nimina says all day. Ongu Top Sange to Ribachima some Jorg and Neva Yomare, Wongu Chomsares and Ase. Otiba de Chiguna, yeah.
No. So then the next point are the sort of extreme consequences. And this again is at sort of our pointing out those extreme consequences. And this begins with the opponent saying, well, what at death time, when there is no thought, there will be no origination of samsaric dharmas. So here they again are asserting that an empowerment has the ability to destroy the capacity of mind. And here when we're talking about mind, this is a slightly different idea in these non-Buddhist schools like the Samkhyas and so forth, where they take this like great intellect or mind to be that which takes on objects. And for them, they are asserting that a ritual empowered by God has the ability to destroy the power of that mind. And again, it's a slightly different different definition than what we would understand here. And so for them, they assert that from the power of this empowerment, that at death time, there will be no thought, and thus nothing to attach, nothing to continue to take rebirth. But the response to that then is the stains of attachment, etc., adhering to a dying person who has obtained empowerment will connect with this subsequent homogeneous mind because of the completion of the uninterruptible direct cause with the capacity to affect that result. So here again, the response to this is that we haven't cut that continuum of homogeneous causes. The kind of consciousnesses, our visual consciousness, our auditory consciousness, mental consciousness. These all have as their previous moment, or homogeneous mind is a previous moment of mind. And so in our own system, an empowerment does not have the ability to eliminate that cause. There is going to be the completion of the uninterruptible direct result with the capacity to affect that result. So we have, or direct cause, sorry. So we have the direct cause that is going to lead to that mind with stains of attachment and so forth, continuing to take rebirth. And so the opponent comes back again, trying to argue that since the final mind's capacity to connect with subsequent homogenes has been destroyed by the empowerment, such connection does not exist. So again, they're trying to assert that through empowerment, one can get rid of this capacity to connect with subsequent homogenes, particularly at the time of death. So the root verses to this read, and again, this will go sort of opponent, us, and opponent. When at death there is no thought, there will be no rebirth. We reply, the stains will connect with a subsequent mind. If you say the capacity to connect does not exist, and then it'll continue.
Oh yeah, Tara Lupa, Tanda Lanchidwa, one Guru Toba, Shira, one Guru Toba, Sumbanina, one good top son, Tanda, Sambuchan, Gay Consati, Maship, Tiansura, Ringlet some Jore, Nuba Meber, Joatase, Telayani, Shiva, the Samlutan, Tonya Tayala, so what to do, some Joa Meber Joata, somebody didn't go on top of the Siorda, Mebata. Te Nuba one good. Some beaches or somebody now, new mean Jurus, somebody did, and then it's all when they were never starting good. Tena rangi ringde sabe, tena rangi ringde sabe, chen, never chakso, the kinche chense. Rangi ringde chick twin my young gangy, and then the chashidan so about to the chance. One guru or something dogma race water. One one guru or dogma mess and gets out in good. One go or something dogma your mares. Can you be top the dami dog by shirap pelna dips? Dami dog by shirap the persona, and then several so what to the man dip do race. Rangi showed to me each in number to the persona, and the koya pel do race water. The Tawadia Dinguda. Nimbutani rangi cho pelna dipdan pege chirse. Niku rangi sabi chen son gulen doba me seche. Oh, this hour to take into son. Rangi cho chimi ichi e pena pewa echers. Tiba do chiguna.
So then the response to that comes with Gyaltsab saying, well, then it follows, if you're going to say that the mind's capacity, should it be like that, that an empowerment has the capacity to cut off the mind's ability, so our ability to see and hear and think and so forth, all of that should be rendered incapable even while alive. So it follows that the mind of a living person who has obtained empowerment will also not have the capacity to connect with subsequent homogenes, even during life itself, because that ability has been destroyed by the empowerment. So if it were the case that empowerment actually had the ability to render that capacity of mind incapable, then it should be the case that while we were alive, we'd be unable to see or hear or think about objects. All of those functions of consciousness would have been destroyed. Thus, the continuum of the faults of attachment, etc., with its own homogeneous seeds, is not removed through empowerment, because when the antidote to the faults, the wisdom realizing no self, increases, the faults decrease. And when the faults increase, there is an increase of what favors the faults, inappropriate mental directionality. So here we can see that it is the case, not that, say, an empowerment is able to render our mind incapable or remove those kinds of faults, but rather when we develop the antidote, the wisdom realizing no self, our faults decrease through the power of that. And when our inappropriate mental chatter or mental directionality increases, then we have an increase in those faults. So we necessarily show that that's what has a kind of relationship, not the mind's ability and an empowerment. So the root verse then reads, then a living person will also will not have the capacity to connect thoughts even when alive. The continuum of faults with its own seeds is not removed through empowerment, because when the antidote increases, faults decrease, and when they increase, with the increase of what favors them.
No, yeah, ta ba cheba bo mero ase ra lu pa she gwa ta ba cheba bo rong ma re se tambu ta ba ma de so la gwa ke da me bar ma wala tarwa mete do so kera ta me na ne tarwa ke wa ne kale ke ni chima rong ge de ma re ke ji chirin jik sa ni chima ta ba tong ge ka yong go sin gora ke da bar ma wala mete do sta ba to ba mete do se na तारालू पाले क्या ना ताकबाल ताकबा टेग मारे मिटा बंदे वाले टेग रिसले क्या गोरा खो जाला टेगे सो खो जा दा मिटा बोरा मावाला ताकबाल सोबा तेदा तोबा टेगे ताकबा मावाला टेग मारे सो मिटे दे सिरा ने ताकबा चिंदु जी नेगब रिम जी केबरे चेबा ग्यावातास ताकबा येना अने चिवे नेगब सो खोल चिं तुंगे न्या या तने तार देवा तो तने चेग नेगब दे केबा दं गेगरे सो को ताकबा येने रो ताला तेबा मेबे चेरे रिम जी केबरे चेबा दा चेदा मेच बादन दवे तानी चेबा गेस तातमे उडो ताकबा ला चिंदार जी नेगब रिम जी केबरे चेबा ग्यावातास रो ने रिम जी केबरे चेबा दा चेदा मेच दाने गेगरे सो takwa kyenla toba mebe chirse, takla toba mebe chirse, rimgi kebar cheba da chedam mechi gegri sedira, tsao yungdo. Drebu kebar cheba tsamyang gewar taas, chedan drebu kebar tsamyang gegri sgora, gewar taa. Takwa lan drebu cheba da mechi ben niba, drabe tan takwa yene ko drebu cheba niba yoyo bache, tu takdu tegri. takbal ya debu kibe niba mena tu tak du niba meme re matonga niba meba chi yeba ta yeba meba cha tende jura yo mares cheta mechi gewa jurwa dawe tani cheta mechi patane dawe tani cheba geset kyudan debu ha chikbar jurse takba ge le sabba bu kansa de takba ene tege kyu negab de kyur sigore debu nyawa bo de takba ene koni ta chi ra de dor jura che chi marwa any chidi jure chidi deburi tende namsha yo mari ni judan debu chikpare ndu do asore judan debu chikpare jus judan debu chikpare jurata takba teni le sokba bu juya yi ni debu nyawa bu debu ya yi be sirsiwara oti bodi chiguna
Oh, no, good.
yuswa
These ones.
ya
So then we turn to a permanent self's unsuitability as a creator. So here, the opponent asserts or is a proponent of such a self, such a permanent self. And their sort of query to us is, well, it is unacceptable that you Anatmavadins or the proponents of selflessness be liberated. So, in their minds, if you are propounding that there is no self or that there's an impermanent self, then that self would be destroyed or it's non existent. And so, therefore, it's unacceptable that you even posit that there's some kind of liberation. So, it's actually the opposite, though. In Galtub J's reply, we see it is acceptable for us to assert liberation, but it is not acceptable for those who speak of a permanent self. And the reason for this is, and it follows that it is contradictory for a permanent self successively to affect generation of the states of bondage and liberation, because a permanent entity is independent of conditions. So here, if you had some kind of a permanent self, you couldn't speak of it as being bound or caught up in samsara at one point and then liberated at another, because you can't talk about different states of something that is permanent. You can't have it arise in stages or come about successively, because that contradicts its being something permanent. So this is one of the problems. You can't actually posit a self that is bound and a self that is liberated, because a permanent entity is independent of conditions that would affect such a liberation or such a bondage. It follows that it is also contradictory that a permanent self even affect the generation of a result, because the permanent would then act with a nature such that it is able to be both a producer and a non-producer of results. So here, it's contradictory for a permanent thing to generate results, because then it would have to always be bringing about results. So you can't have a time when there is a result and there isn't a result. That is contradictory, again, for there to be those kind of different states, or it would have to be such that it is always bringing about that result. And that, again, it contradicts logic. So here, it follows that cause and effect or cause and result will be identical, because the same self that is the accumulator of karma is the experiencer of that result. So here again, we can't speak of a distinct sort of self at the time of the cause, at the time of accumulating karma, and one at the time of experiencing the result. They would have to be the same, because this is a permanent self. So those are the kinds of contradictions that occur if one is to assert such a permanent kind of a self.
Oh yeah. Tayan su labkido changshan bag. Kunde deda ta takwa dele tate dos. Ta takwa de gyuyin debu yin sigi yomar ta sigore. Gyu chenge de le sakwa bogu ta ina le de gyuche. Debu nyabu debu de mato ta de gyudan debu mayin si tini kakari zeta de res sulen yagdwa. Kunde deda ta takwa dele zeta de do shina se. Teta dele tadena singe tsawadin gudwa, teta dele tadena se. Ta ranglu pa le jagora. Ta takwa tingi le sheba boda, debu sawa bo yinba nyambar jwa tini kera, ta takwa tin debu sheba bo re mendo asigora. Debu di kebar shig mendo ase, ni sheba bo maro asigora. Debu sawa bo suden, debu sawa bo re mendo ase. Chidan sabu tangu sheba mimbeta sawa bo yinsigora, long sheba bo yinsigora. Sawa mayin barta koli atene takba yena longje ke medua long debu ne kapsu ko yo marwa kasura kudan debu keba me chibare se do do ta takba tini le cheba bodan debu sawa bo yen banyambar yo atas chebu sambo nyambar yoru se sawade nyuba yane dru mayin se ta takba tele ya debu le pen do ban nyuba yan dru to mare se saw yo nyuba yane dru mayin takba la cheson do do ma chawe takba singe de gyuru yobala tene drebudin jumata takba de gyuru mena drebudin takba tende chesun do do yomare takba de kati ko drebuki niba yene yo rimene meme rede yordo takba le yan drebudi chesun do do druba sigmare suwara tene ka takba la chesun do do machawe cheso tiba do chijuna machawe cheso
So, then the opponent comes back saying, well, we're not saying that such a permanent self is the cause and the result, but rather those causes and results are substantially different from that permanent self. So they're not saying that there is a self at the time of the cause that you would, and then a self at the time of the result that are identical with that cause and result, but rather there is something that those causes and results are substantially different from that permanent self. And so the response to this is, again, it follows that this will undermine the idea that the producer of karma and the experiencer of the result is that permanent self. So, again, how can you talk about the self acting as a creator or an experience or an enjoyer of something if they're trying to say that at one time something existed and then another time it did not exist? So again, there is no way that one can posit that this same self that is the producer of karma would be the experiencer of the result. That undermines then that trying to assert such a permanent self as being both of those. And it follows that it is not even proven that a permanent self is able to assist in bringing about the result, because a permanent self does not have complete ability to show positive and negative concomitants. So basically, if you are asserting a permanent self, there's no way that one can show it as being able to bring about a result. If it is causing something, then it must be always causing that, or always producing that, or never producing that. It can't change from a state where it's bringing something about to a state where it's not. So again, we've shown that it's a logical impossibility for a permanent self to act in that capacity to bring about a result.
Oh, yeah. So cool. Oh, that man, Shangy, Shangy, Trembata, Shangy, Sakba, Shangy, Longjoba, so, Minguro, Shenas, Yankaji Sulabudua, Kerada, Daba, Messic Doas, Taxirawachi, Dame, Ranget to the Damesic Doas. That man, and Shangy, Shangy, Temba condition grace, Wura. Shangy, that man, Shangy, Shangy, Tembata order. That Daba the Mana, Sigora, round with Damena. Kechi Jingeji Tashabina, less Sange the Shiksari Chema Debu Yobu Kabla Yomardo. And less Sange the concession that you saw Chema Mom, Debu Yonga de Shandachi Yong Dugdani, Shangi Soso Sagbe, Legend Debu Soso Younger Mother, Shangi Sagbe Debu de Shandachi Yomar, Tedan Gegdo Sigora. Ta mena Shangi Yoa Shangi Temba Danse. Ta mena Shangi Yoa Shangi Temba. Shangi Sagba, Shangi Longjoba Soso, Minguro Shenas, Shangi Noa, Shangi Tambaside, Chicken Usum de Ton, Nima meeting Usum de Ton, Tatine Lok Mambuchi Chin, Jemako, Yanga Tangiro, digging Nima Ton something that I am ever do this. Nima Ton get a bell or Arwa, Komarwa, Koton Yamarangeton, Yam the train by Mel Chowder. Not in your gate that she might tanging your concept, a color, Tagba Maina. Neme kansa tonge tira takba chiten chima de tongina ni tene digora midaba ine kongema de tonge de logare tande tenge be logare kosaba tongorwa o chigi chi temba de ngumare ngar sawe le kinde bu chima de nyo ngumare sora ta nangbalya ta mena shenje nyo shenje temba da shenje sabwa shenje longjo ba so so minjuro shenase chula ro ta ranglu pha lenja yoda Nyonde chebabu ta yube jusenji pumbu keji mara mawala se. Nga nyonde chebabu ta yore, midakbe ta yore. Debu dusakba bodan, debu nyoabu ta yore. Timidakba na te tegre se. Nyonde chebabu ta yube jusenji pumbu keji mara mawa nangba sanje bala se gordo. Ene kerange kyen chwe den yugmares. Shenje nyoa, shenje temba dan, shenje sakba. Shangi Sagba, Shangi Longjoba Lasogba, Longjoba Lasogba, Tawan Nuchido, Minjuk Bartase, or Shangi Musumji Tomaji Kansa Shangi Taya, Shangi Ledge Santin Debu Shandachi, Yongmares, Wada. Shangi Tanda Longjus or Tawan Nuchi Mayin Days, it's all Yongua. Shangi Tanda Longjus, Tawan Nuchi Mayin Days. Nuji Mayin de Thabkhe Kibun Gaya Ngar Nyonga Chi Temba maybe Thabkhe Yena Ngar Nyonga de Chi Ten Yung Mare Sewara Gaya Temba maybe Chiri Se Tsawa de Yungdwa Tena Nyongle Temba Jung Sadre Le Jaba Chu Seva da Majaba da Trebala Sogbe Niba Me Bartas Nambalia Yu Chungba Nyonga Le Temba Chitawa Shindu Junga Tene Sora Tena Nyongle Temba Yense Nima Tong Sosoge Lokasha Nelia Chitondwa Te Tongengi Ta Kejima Teranda Tanda Teomara Te Guntun Deora Chimaji Tonda Narmusum do Tonga Yudida Tanda Tonga Yudi Chikosunda O Dingema Tonsha some Tentu Gueras could Gundi Deora Kansa Chikoran take up Gita de Deoma Duri de Jurgis Deora and you Musum Tonga Yudida Chima could Tembek of the Tonga Yudi Chikosunda O Dinga Tonsha some Tentu Gueras Injimiji Takbach and Majority Deomaris. Oh, Sumba Tamba, Chita Washington, John H. Or did you do?
So then the opponent comes back with this idea that, well, if there is no self, then one person would have an experience and another would remember it. And one person would accumulate karma and another would enjoy its fruits, etc. So they say, well, if there is no self, no self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or no autonomous self, and it is just something that is impermanent, momentary, like you assert, well, then you would have the fault that one person would have an experience and another person would have the memory of that, or one person would accumulate karma and another person would experience the results of that karma, because you don't have the same person at the time of say experiencing something and at the time of remembering it, because you're asserting that there is some kind of momentary self. So this is the opponent's position, that without such a permanent self, you would have these faults. And so the response to that is that those who say the aggregates are momentary by reason of the no self of the experiencer and rememberer do not have their position damaged by the consequence that one person has an experience and another remembers it, or that one accumulates karma and another enjoys the fruit, because there is not any permanent person who first has an experience and later remembers it. So here, it's actually the case that it's not coherent to assert a permanent person that experience or accumulates a cause and experiences the result. That it's only coherent actually if we assert an impermanent person. And so there is a self that is the basis of, say, engaging in various activities, but it's not the case that they then become a different person who experiences the result of that action, or for example, experiences memory of something. Again, if it were a permanent person, such memory would be impossible. How could you have a person at the time of the experience and then at the time of the memory that is the exact same? So here, if we have, for example, an object that was experienced, say you saw someone and you have a visual cognition of that person, and then many years later you see the same person again, it's possible to have that memory of the person just based on the experience of that object. Because although the exact same person that saw that original person doesn't exist, the continuum of that person still exists. So it's not a totally separate person who, say, saw that person originally and then many years later has the memory based on seeing them again. But because we hold that continuum, we hold that as if it's the same person, although we are changing moment to moment. So the self that saw the original thing is not the exact same self as the one who experienced it later, but there's no lack of coherency because there's still a continuum of that. It doesn't actually have to be the same person. So thus it follows that there is no fault such that one wastes karma that has been created or meets the result of karma not created, because memory originates from the experience of an object similar to one encountered before in accordance with conditions. So we don't have to have a permanent self in order for there to be coherency. It is actually the case that it needs to be an impermanent self in order for there to be coherency. So again, going back to the root verse, if you say that without a self, one person would have an experience and another would remember and enjoy it, we reply, our position is not damaged by this consequence because there is not anyone who remembers. Thus, memory originates from experience.
No, yeah, that's about Dami to be shirp Trelam to Tempasta, Ralu, the Shedwa. Dame to be shirp the Trelam de Tunge Combata, Wangur Tobata, Tata Shasa, Tada, Chito, Tade, in Banzimba, Tezumaris, Trelam, Dami to be shirp de Tabal to Archibelam days where I ran away. Oh, the guys named Tembashila, Lobar Shuk Bear, Tungela, Temba, Devada, Tembashila, Lobar Shuba. Mitabala Tabar Zimba, Roa, Tungala Tawara Zimba, Tonala Meton Zimba, Tamebal Tayo Banzimba Sigura, Losushi Ungura, Teganashi Kunju Tembal Losushi Ora, Leda Yumu Manide, Tungegi Juris, two Mares, two members Zimbarwa, two Kunju, Tungi Kunju Sagashi Basi, Til Loksu, Shishi Ungura, Shanda Kanga Lamla Losuchi, Loksu Shishi, Chudu Ungura, or Tezo Logba Shuba, Changulo de Shuba Teonge. And this is about getting a cocoa shivera. Tembashila Logbar Shuba, Tungela Tachi, Temba Asim, Mitabala, Tabata, Medeni Kasura, Tungela Devata, Dangamebala, Narawa Zimbata, Naiwa Mebala, Naiwa Zimba. Yeshe so Yanda, Mimba Shitas, Tungetambala Mibe, Nambashila, Mitatungeto, the Mishila Logbar Shuba, Loksu, Chinchilo, Zimba Loshi, the Sigora. Number Lama Shanda Kunjung Godin Lamden the Chabala, Shishi Ungura, Lama Namda Chabala, Chudu Todane, or Loksu Chudu de Todane. We also said, Sebe one thing in some choices. Tembashila Tembata Tedanga Dangesha, so Yanda member Nam Chudu Todane, you also says again, or Tiba to Chiduna, yeah.
So then we turn to the point showing that the wisdom realizing no self is the path to freedom. So here we have been refuting the idea that just the meditation on suffering or a ritual empowered by God or realizing that the person is separate from this general principle or any of these other paths that are asserted by different schools are actually a path to freedom. And so here it says then, craving is the root of samsara because when one has superimposed their inverses on the Four Noble Truths, such that suffering is permanent, is stable, or pleasurable, or is I and mine, along with the remaining incorrect interpretations of the 16 aspects, then there is craving. And by the force of craving, there is continued birth. So again, we have gone through the sort of distorted notions or distorted thoughts that one can have regarding the Four Noble Truths. Like the first of these, the truth of suffering, grasping at that as being pleasurable or permanent, pleasurable, not empty, and having some kind of a self. Those wrong or distorted cognitions with respect to the truth of suffering and the others as well. Those like the truth of origination, wherein we hold the idea that suffering is causeless or that the cause is something that's not actually the cause and so forth. There are these wrong conceptions or superimpositions with regard to the aspect of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And so long as we have that, then there's going to be craving. And by the force of that craving, one will then take continued rebirth. So again, when one has superimposed on the Four Noble Truths that suffering is stable or pleasurable or I and mine, incorrect interpretations of the 16 aspects, then there is craving.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is how the Todas Islam come. Yeah, that Kunjung Langazu, Tangzi da, I think Chagdang da, Tangzi da, Chagdang, the Jashi, the Musum de Sigura, King Arazu Chena, Te Jureci Samlo Cornichioto, Nge Sam Rankavieta, Rangi Mitumbal Kapdicha, Kondo Kuyu, some Chagba Kuyu, some Shanja Chenamatos, Nata Dimar Sambido. That is a Kango Loksu to the Anganyamungara. Till Mare, let a new woman to make it good. To make Kunju Sadere, Ju Kunju, Rabji, to make Shutrabu Jure. Rwa Seba Dozo Tunga Gelhenji in Chigre Sheriora. Some Loksu de Kachigua. A Tavana Shetani Lamda China, Tamedo Beshir of the Talamares, Najalam Rigba Truba Niji Shegora, Taba Truba Truba Lam Res, Lam, and Yamoki Yambu Rigba Res, Lam Rigba, Sentinelu Chinjimalo Truba Res Sheriora. That under conditions, Tato Zimbati Yogore, Taji Yogore. Ti Talamari ti Shakure, Tig, Chigio Marsigor, Chetan Shakudwa. Taganation Gopa Shedu Gopa Yamu Sebe Sebatal and Gopa Shiva Janum Nijusera. Chatan says on Ane Gopa Shiva Janum Niju Yisimbere Shigor and Arazu Timar Chana Yuna Yogure Chana Mana, and it's also come to get a Chagio. What is your lamna trader to this year?
So here again, where it has said then when one has superimposed on the Four Noble Truths. So here we make these wrong kind of perceptions, like for example, not just with relation to the truth of suffering, but with the truth of the origin of suffering. We think that those things like grasping at a self are actually beneficial to us. It's like, well, that's how I take care of myself, is I have that self grasping, and that is something that is helping me. I need to follow after that and pursue that. And so we have these wrong ideas about what is the cause of suffering and how it brings about strong suffering and all of our various types of suffering, and how, for example, craving acts as a conducive condition or a coordinating condition to the arising of our suffering. We can have wrong ideas about all of those. We have these distorted kind of cognitions or superimpose these wrong ideas. And with regards to the path, as we have seen in this chapter, discussing those sorts of wrong views, that one doesn't think that the path to liberation is the wisdom realizing selflessness, but rather, again, might think that that self-grasping is necessary. As we see with many of these opponents here, they think that you can't give up that grasping at a self, that that's not actually the right kind of path. And so with regard to the aspects of the truth of the path, that this that the wisdom realizing no self is the path, that it is reasonable in that it accords with reality. It is actually in the nature of the way that things are, not mistaken, and so forth. That as well, when it comes to our understanding of the various aspects of the truth of the path and the truth of cessation, again, with respect to the truth of the path, not recognizing that it can bring about the definite emergence from our various afflictions. We might think that that's not possible. Or again, like with respect to the aspects of cessation, we don't think that a cessation of that is possible, or that such peace exists, that there is such a kind of excellent or sublime state in which there is a definite emergence from those afflictions and karma and so forth. So these are the sorts of wrong superimpositions that we make with regard to the Four Noble Truths, in particular with respect to those four aspects of each of them.
Oh, yeah. Don't do that, Kasha. Oh, yeah. Tami to be shirem ni sibale to lam res shigwa. Tami to be shirem ni sibale to lam hindi shigwa. Oh, Tikaresana. Temba shibu tingi la chinjulo to chinjulo te dange te mita so mita bala sokba te tingi namba chutu yanda bar che so tokba chen lebar kombe tami tokba yanda be tawa yi chendra seba chendra da seba tawa ne jombar chebe cherise o desura de ngazu tawa de tingi la ne menge te suda tingi la ne menge te tingi namba chutu tingi namba 제도 전에서들 레고 미안다 따와이 세바 전다 좀 제스 템바시불 때려 치지 말로라 치지로 저기 딱만 좀 받아 대화를 좀 받아 다른 좀 짜와 좀 발리 치지로 미다바 동에 또 다음에 주시와라 대단계에 때 미다발로 속바 되니 number chudu losu chudu ki yang tak beto number chudu tisigora yang tak ba che so tok ba chen lekbar komba les lekom yang ta tawa ye seba chen ta chen jom je se kombe ta me ba tok ba yang tak be tawa ye se lekom yang ta tawa ye ta me tok be tawa ye se seba chen ta da che ba seba da tele tene kebe da kondo nga je cha do ke mangbu yung do o tezo kanga jombar chigere te so da ta me tok be shirabte o da kar sore o kar tobar chibe chere o tiba do chiguna sawa dikso.
So then it is only the wisdom realizing no self is the path to freedom, because the correct view is that realization of no self, contemplated well with a perfect realization of those 16 aspects, impermanence, etc., the objects that are the opposite of those inverses of the Four Noble Truths, destroys from the root craving together with what follows upon it. So here it is the realization of no self, along with the perfect realization of those 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, impermanence and so forth. So recognizing that which we normally grasp at as permanent is impermanent, and that perceived as pleasurable is actually in the nature of suffering, and that things are selfless and empty and so forth. That only this wisdom realizing no self is the path to freedom, because this correct view that is a realization of the no self has the ability to root up all of these wrong conceptions. It destroys as well from the root this craving together with what follows upon it. So it is by this correct realization that one is able to extricate all of these wrong views, wrong conceptions with respect to the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, and in particular, be able to destroy from the root the craving together with what follows on it. So in the root verse, then, the correct view of no self, contemplated well with a realization of those 16 correct aspects, the objects that are the opposite of those misinterpretations listed above, destroys craving together with what follows upon it.
Oh, yeah, think that's it. Oh, don't go this. Taya kaji chula bidwa. Seba me jansa, seba me na leda lu yit yona ne kwale tu maria ya kwa kigrese. Lu kigrese gra. Ne karsore. Seba me jan leda le yona legi wange kwa kigreva sura. Ne lu yona lu kigrese gra. Seba me jan leda lu yona kwale metor guru shenase. Teni rangluk pa tachomba chejense le dan lu dan nena yasa tachomba de tangzin pa nyamo pa sara seba yo mare lu de tanda de yorwa le saye yore le ngema sa shebe le mambu tanda de yora le dan lu de tanda tunge gi lu de yora tanda le dan lu dan nena yasa larian kore kewa shiba maomba na ta kumbu de dorsa sune kewa le yo mare se sawa le dan lu dan nena ya Jingmi chena gyusum chense seba chibu de yoma rese luda leni yona ya seba de yoma re gyusum bunane jingmi chena gyusum chense kwa ge wala gyusum sum go go da le da luce eni seba che de ora kewa seba mai de ta chomba de yanga le da luni yona ya seba mena yanga kwa le kewa sigma rese ora kewa seba mai de sabe me ba nyugo shese sabe me na ni nyugo ke yumura teshin do resi gora so gyuchik me be chese chingmi chena so gyude seba de rese so gyu seba me be chese tabde sibare kewa gyusumba chen imbe chese gyusumga gora otene so de seba me na ni le de na yangja kwa jik ma resi gora sabe me bara nyugo shinos o tishkuna.
So here, then the opponent comes back with this. Well, even if there is no craving, if karma and the body still exist, one will not be freed from samsara. So their assertion is that, well, there are these three causes that create rebirth within samsara. So if you just get rid of this craving, but still have karma as well as the body, then how could one be freed from samsara? Because you still have these two remaining causes. So here, the response to that is then, an arhat cannot possibly be born again into samsara, even if karma and the body remain. So we can have an arhat where they have eliminated all of the afflictions, but they still have the suffering body, and they are still going to have karma. We have accumulated karma since beginning this time, so they could still have karma remaining. But even if karma and the body remain, because one of the chief causes, craving, does not exist, then they're not possibly able, it's not possible for them to be reborn in samsara. And this reason pervades because birth into samsaric existence has three causes. So again, we need, it's generally the case that we need to have the body, karma, and craving in order to have all of this sort of causes and conditions necessary for rebirth within samsara. But if you take away craving, which is the chief cause, even if you still have the body and karma, you're not able to generate the result of a future rebirth. And the example given is, for example, without there being a seed, a sprout will not originate. So in order to bring about a sprout, you need various causes and conditions. But if you're missing the seed, you can't have a sprout. And so too, although it's necessary to have these three conditions or three causes come together, because craving is the principal one, without that, you're not going to have rebirth. So in the root verse again, it says, one cannot possibly be born again, even if karma and the body remain, because one critical cause, craving, does not exist. Rebirth, after all, has three causes. For example, without there being a seed, a sprout will not arise, even if earth and water are present.
Oh yeah, tadi le ti tatsum chana tanda le te ora kyo ngama sa sheba migi le da kyo le mabu de ora ina kon debu min to yo marta keba seba da kuba lemba se le la so tamke sabe yo na ko chuda le to zu mena tene nyugu ke to mardo le yo na ya ta kersan tembe su chere le yo na ya le to zu ko kenchen ge keba seba kuba lemba medu le ne ba tu chen du chen debu de mi ba che to yo mara Seba pangba de le de nimi so shagwara nimi sinada le de le kema sama charwa sabe yona ya nyuke ya sabe de yona ya chulu mena ke marno ode na shi chasoro ene ya le saba sa ya yorwa tangjing yong le saba sa mar ma do chida le sa ya yorwa ke wa sa de yorro le yore sakje ge le ko pen le yo mar ma do le saba sa ya yore ko ke le mare ke se yora te le yora 다 루세데 데스거든 지당하고 남바게데 루테 루안세데 루세 샤도 리버디 간자 마르 텔템베 렉자 타테도 소통되게 네버시도와 저 왕부 루안세라 루안세 미와세데 코 데샤 도도 간자 마르 텔 투무 많이 바시고 수도도 통통하게야 믹세게 수 개발 sensin도와 다트 통계치 너구 팀을 소통게 데샤 냥 통계 자단 신다 도저히는 다 지르보바히는 왕부 여시거든 남바전 왕부 요마도 렉자녀에도 수녀에도 왕부 요마 고치 수지도 줍되어도 제자디 왕부도 시갈라몰이야 겨치마야 되네시 통에 누버시야 누뱅오르지 남신님도 러시아거래 겨랑도자 시바디 쇼도자 시바차사가 밤에 쿠다도 미래지는 쿠다데지는 데리아 명화도 나와 데절로 롱체게 그 왕부터 두지 네버체 냠돌래 되어라 숙제들래 비어 말이데 어떻게 류시거다 류되게 치마 주치 그래서 때 류되 대줄 세대거라 어떻게 람네
So Here, when it comes to this, we can have all kinds of karma that we have accumulated, still have remaining much karma, but without craving and grasping the eighth and ninth links of the 12 links of dependent origination, one is unable to actually bring about a ripening result from those karmas, from those actions. So if we don't have, even if we have accumulated many actions in the past, if that craving and grasping is lacking, then those karmic results are not going to come about. The conditions will not be present for those to actually bring about the results of those actions. So when it comes to karma, we can talk about the kind of contaminated karma that is driven by our grasping at a self, but there's also virtuous actions. One can have uncontaminated karma and so forth. But when it comes to then the causes for taking rebirth, one needs to have karma as a cause, as well as the kind of craving that ripens it, that brings about the result from that previous action. And so as for when it comes to the body here, now normally when we talk about the body, we're sort of talking about our physical body, or we could be speaking about the sort of body, our physical sense power, the ability to feel sensation. Or when it comes to our visual sense power, there is actually a type of form, or that subtle form that is the basis of that physical power that has the ability to give rise to consciousness. So this is a special kind of form that has the potential for giving rise to that kind of consciousness. So when it comes to our taking rebirth, when we die, those kinds of our manifest visual consciousness and physical consciousness and so forth go into sort of like a potential state. And when we take rebirth, when the consciousness actually enters into the womb and the mixing of the blood and sperm and so forth, one takes along those sort of potentialities for developing the physical sense powers. You don't actually have them at that moment in the womb, but there's the basis for then generating those in a future rebirth. And that's actually what we'd be referring to here as body, is that those potential for our giving rise to the various types of physical sense powers in our next rebirth.
Oh, yeah, that's somebody led a loose zebra. Leda lu sebe tapsam cholam yesenge stishigwa cholam do rungmaras ta chirbu bagando bashigwa trangjem bashesara ta chirbu bashigwa cheda leda lu de sebe tapchi ores te cholam reswara leda lu niti ta one gura dindure teliatini kabache ani tele sul zobache ya pa lenche se tishigwa oh te consideration namge question ba kaji nares namge question sichirbu balasigora tambu kidune ko marang se kigiwara te kidune ko tulo ke ko marese tingara de chisungo sa jabe tulo de teacher tambu kidune se che namga de ko na shere te chen de shan chotop gorese chirbu ba do marang al te do oh dire namge question ba kaji nares le da lu se janse le se lu se jan Sibale Tor Gurdese, Leda Lunibu de Sessona, Sibale Tordure, Tangjin da Chidamid de Comare Sigora, Leda, Sosa Sasha Bele di Zogore, Giolen let Zogore, and the Tanda you will lose the Zogore Sora. Leda Luda Sebejan, Sibale Tor Gurdese, Gioa Jusum Bajan Besser, Gioa Tele Jusum Duase, Leze Lucero. Oh, tennis bache, Shachogo, imbecile. Tena le lu bashiki nimbo temba resource, le de kanga su ruru su, tele nimbo chitem mebasu, and a lu de mebasu shana, and a tarba top do this yorno. Shenas, a kajik debatish, Tijulamna, Zawa Dagredo. Oh. Oh, let the Ludena sing mission at Tusumcha. The Tandi so did, yeah, Tijuland. So,
So, um, then we turn next to, and Roger has it written as like a refutation of Jaina soteriology. So this is referring to opponents who, again, is, as the first point relates, assert that merely eliminating karma and the body is the path to freedom. So we're going to respond to that with the unacceptability as a path to freedom of merely eliminating karma and the body. So these actually in the Tibetan tradition are sort of called like the naked ones. They think that, well, we were born naked, so why do you need to put any clothes on? We should just be naked. So that's usually the way in which they're referred to. But here, Roger has used the term digambara, that's just like a white clad one, or sort of wearing, sky clad can refer to them being naked. So anyway, they would assert that if we say that there are these three causes of taking rebirth, well then even by the elimination of just karma and the body, one will be freed from samsaric existence, because rebirth has three causes. So for them, they think, well, if we were to extinguish the body and karma, if you get rid of those, then you have eliminated two out of the three of these causes. So thus, one will not take rebirth. So their idea is sort of like if you could gather together all of your karma and apply an antidote to that, that would be the best way to go. So they say, thus, it is reasonable to rely on the antidotes only to karma and the body.
Oh yeah. Tara lupa labdwa. Seba mabambar leda lu poniva mares kira seba de pamugo leda lu seba chene taban toya de yong mares yoda. Seba mabambar leda lu da ne pang togu mares yora poniva maye de se. Leda lu da pomi de se de. Seba mabambar leda lu da pon mares yora. Nyembo dane mecher da se. Leda lu kyangba poya nyembo chi yo mares yora. Tini kyangya te kona meba songbenge nyembo yo mares yora. Nyembo dane mecher da se. Numi chero se de. Seba mabambar teda seba poya nuba mebecher. Seba mabambar do ne leda lu la soba shenda poya tene nuba yongu mares yora. Seba mabambar leda lu da seba poya nuba yo mares yora. Numi chero se seba ne yona la yung chero stawa derwa. Mebar ta se seba yona la yani leda lu tuzo yongu res yora. Jungi chero se ran lupa o chawa de tiniga diswa tiji jona.
So here, then, the response to this is that without abandoning craving, one will not be able to abandon karma and the body, because there are no antidotes for abandoning karma and the body. So saying that instead of addressing the kind of craving, you just need to get rid of karma and the body is not a tenable kind of option, because without abandoning craving, there is actually no antidote for just eliminating our body and karma. There's no way to just deal with them. So until one gets rid of karma, one is going to continue to have to take rebirth. So because without abandoning craving, one is not able to utterly abandon karma and the body. It follows that this is so, because when there is craving, there is renewed karma, and from that, the origination of a body. So really, the craving is the essential kind of cause that one needs to remove, because there's no method for just removing body and karma. And actually, it is the case that so long as one continues to have craving, there is going to be renewed taking up of a body due to the force of karma. So the root verse then reads, one will not abandon karma and the body because there are no antidotes, and because one is unable, because when there is craving, there is renewed origination.
Oh yeah. That chobon de la sum de jungudwa. Ta panje ma wo de yungudwa. Choba bon de la sum yungudwa. Leda seba niga jumbe. Nyembo shizon su temba. Ta re la mo cho ne yungudwa. Sum dwa ta tambo de re. Le se niga jumbe nyembo shizon su temba kagwas. Leda seba niga de jumbe nyembo chiba chungba temba. Ta nyembo ne tenzu shegdwa. Tipa kagdwa. 다른 루파 진짜 가시도스나 tena leda tetana lese niga sosor sebe tanto beba rikte se leda seba niga sosor sebe tanto beba rikte niga koye gyuyin bechero shenase leda seba niga sosor sebe tanto bego de le sebe tanto bego resi gora bego tingiga koye gyurba shenase su kajin debati chera taranlu ba Tawandu Gadulia. Nisa Tondum Bana, Lessa Dubatum, Adim. Ya, Nisa Tondum Bana, answered their Beku Grace, Niga Leda Seba Niga, Sebet and the Beku Grace at the Redwa Tawatama, the Nisa Tondo Bana, answered Yungdua. Tenicasidos Ralupa. Le loso sebe Nimbo Duba Tomebata, ta le loso sebe Nimbo to come Roa. Any Kale Kemni. One my younger Kalemabuja sugar. Le loss of Sebes to let Zoyek, Naranzo Tibeta Exedo, Tacha Savas to the Orno, the new net or tis or a cigarsa. Le loss of Sebe, Nimbo, La Tubas, Kale Kemne, Lulu Kalemabuteva, the Tandava Marisha, Temi Bartas, Seba Mabamber Pomunus, Seba Mabana, any Casere. Lady Rosso ne Kalikamna Sibabantu Mato. Loso Pambala, Koba maybe Chelsea. Loso Yan Le Panchi Tondachi, Bezuchable Koba Marisora. Disora. Leset Duba Demi is. Lechibu Sebe Chedu Lugi Kalejabadi Tonda Marisora. Debunazo Toya Chelsea. Namugi Tawa Chick Pangbe Shantam Japon. Pong la se nyamo ke tsawa dangjin de chi pang ban sha den je pang du ro le la te da bi chu me be che le da me da na so ro ke wa me ke wa de na so yo de te zo le le ya te zo ta ma pong je ke nyamo de chi yo ma re so yo de le la te da bi chu me de ki bi le na ne ba ta de ba chen tu ma che so po ne de ki bi le te le ya ke wa me ke wa da le da me lu nga so le da me ma bu yo ra Oh, there's a gosh, let too much and poor new last you shit to go to Legend debut you do on the Mewa, not so much and to Toyachers. Oh, that did I look for till 20 on. So I didn't go to let's say, do but to me, let's you say, but I do so collected to never matters. Debu Nazo Toy, Lenam never tade to us. Then Debu Nazo Toy, Ledel never tade Mambuchi or this. Tezuya leg to the Nimbusi Logatenti, Kobayomari, Le Mambudis, Tawoni Gumbashi, Chibotena Katukis. Now what is question? Moundasa. Yeah.
So here then the opponent again this is the point of dispelling of objections to this. So these will come below. We don't need to go through all of them. The first then is refuting reliance on equally strong antidotes for destroying both karma and craving. So here the opponent thinks, well, okay, you're saying that we need to make effort at destroying craving, but what if we just rely upon an antidote for destroying karma and craving together? Would that not be a suitable sort of path? And so here the opponent then says, if that is the case, then it is reasonable that one strive for the sake of eliminating individually both karma and craving, because both are causes of samsara. So here, then Galtabje responds that it follows that it is pointless to fatigue oneself for the sake of an antidote that will separately eliminate karma. Because without abandoning craving, one will not abandon karma. So it is not necessary to abandon karma separately. So we can see that we do various sort of practices aimed at purifying our negative karma through various practices, doing the nyungne and so forth. But those, again, are not sort of separate kind of actions that are solely to get rid of karma. There actually is no method to separately abandon karma, but rather by abandoning the root of the defilements, one can abandon all the others. There is, however, no way that abandoning of just one karma will have a result, because one can infer that people's karmas have many different potencies. Because we see that the various results of karma are pleasant or unpleasant. So here again, it's not that we could actually remove all of our karmas. We couldn't. It would be pointless to exhaust ourselves for the purpose of trying to get rid of each potency of every karma, every action that we have accumulated in the past. There are many different results. We see that people are constantly experiencing the different results of their karma. And so it doesn't make sense to make an effort at just getting rid of that karma, because again, if one roots out the defilements, one abandons karma altogether. Or if one gets rid of craving, one will abandon karma, but one can't sort of separately try to eliminate that karma. So in the root verse, it says, if you say that one must strive for the sake of eliminating both karma and craving, we reply, it is pointless to fatigue oneself in order to eliminate karma. One can infer that karmas have many different potencies because we see the various results.
Oh yeah. Tadi ode udah. Tabe wala sobe kadu getwe nyomo ki ngobo chiki le tamje menje bartaase. Ta togbala soba chi kangere chik jamne. Ane le kitsa neba payati o mare sigora. Tabe wala sobe kadu ki kale kebe ki tonga si tonge nyowa nyomo ki ngobo chiki se. Le tamje menje bartaase. Le tamje chawchune pangtog mares. Le chi pangbe le ku por juwelen me le chi pangsone le sama tamje por juwele yo mares. Pena tangjin de chi pangsone nyomo sama por juwe yongu yo to tende le yo mares. Le taye be tenese le taye bare. Tene nami yido wa le odire. Tade nyamdo lapsan de mana. Nami yido wa le kasura. Bi nyomongo che ki menje se ta nyomomba le karso kale kebe tuni nyomomba tunge nyaya to ngobo chi ki pa jebar singe so tunge nyebu yo mare se gorno ti pa so ba che ta chi tan sungora nami yido we le san nami yido wa le sambungo do so ade chi da nangba chen ngo to jirbe po to gure se gora yedo meo ale le ngamba ngodo so nami yedo meo tunga nyangu tona tangema le ngamba sakbe debure samti ngodo rikbe potore sora yedo meo na so mesena le kasore yedo wa tawada tunga na so na totoli le ndameda na so kitigile mambusa ngodo so ade ngodo rikbe potore sora le sange na so ngodo so ngodo to su rikbe ngobo tokso ge tale po togres tag tup togres warda debo ngeba jindona le ge gu ngeba singo do sowa debo sambo jindona tele gu sambo ke wa singo do sowa te po togres wara rigbe tup togres wara sida ina ya midra bishina midelia tunge mabu chione ko le ngeba sagbe ngema kadu sabre le de kadu sabre kawa sabre kande sa do sana ha ko yo mare ngoto ge rigbe tup tog mare 개화르지 무슨 저거죠 코텐데 야구 영역에 레상보다 사요를 특교와 가지 사버래 간데서 사도 사단설로 간데서 때 르베트베 요마도 대상계를 지금 무슨 두세네니 롱레 바소네 다 텔레케멘도 대상계 숨바 담바이기 섬 이시기 따세로와 이시기 따세도 마도 어떻게 르베 툭툭 마로와 되지 그나 된데도 지들 제바선이 신도 거기서 지당은 주로 거기로 신도 거기서 요라 문주딩 알아서 소소게 무슨도 또 되더라 거기서도 뭐도 기획받아 근데 딸 때네 직내 작배 따든데 거요 딸 때는 또 통계돼서 신도 거기서 사계를 농장을 때네 다 이시기 다는데 세시어도 텔텐 도고 봤음서다 야 되시구나 뭐도 좀 다들
So, then, thus, it follows that by one affliction inflicted by pulling out hairs, or I might say like one torment, this is giving yourself suffering, not like an affliction that we normally speak about. So, by one torment inflicted by pulling out hairs, or by some other specific austerity, one will not eliminate all karma, because by abandoning one karma, one will not abandon all karma that will be abandoned, since karmas are infinite. So it doesn't, it's not sort of logical to engage in some kind of austerity, like say pulling out one's hairs or doing some kind of other practice, extreme fasting or whatever it may be, in order to exhaust karma, because one can't exhaust all of the karma that one has accumulated since beginningless time. And it's not possible that one austerity, engaging in one specific practice, could eliminate all karmas. You can't sort of that is not possible to do. So it's not the case like how with our self-grasping, if we develop the wisdom realizing no self, that elimination of self-grasping eliminates all of the afflictions that come from that. So by eliminating that one thing, we eliminate all afflictions. But there's no antidote that could possibly counteract all of the previous actions that we have accumulated. There's no such austerity that can act in such a way as to eliminate karmas exhaustively. So that's the kind of point that is made here, is that tormenting oneself, or as it says, one will not eliminate all heterogeneous results through some torment, though the result generated will be lesser. Oh, sorry, that we'll just set that aside. Sorry. So that's the kind of specific point here, is that we can generally say that although by eliminating self-grasping, one can eliminate all of the kind of results that come from that, it's not the case that by eliminating karma, one can, so in a similar way, eliminate all karmas or all actions. So it then turns to sort of a general topic. So one can infer through objectively impelled reasoning from pleasant results that they were preceded by good karma, and from unpleasant results that they were preceded by bad karma, and from a mixture of pleasant and unpleasant results that they were preceded by a mixture of good and bad karma. But where, when, and how the karma that preceded the body was created are very hidden phenomena. So in general, we are able to understand, comprehend through objectively impelled reasoning that there is a connection between cause and result, that when we create a good or a positive cause, we are going to experience something pleasant as the result. And in general, when we create a bad cause, when we do something non-virtuous, we are going to experience a suffering result. That is something that we are able to understand, but we can't understand the very specifics of karma. We can't say, look at a bad rebirth and actually point back to the exact cause and the way that one committed that action. That's only within the scope of the knowledge of the Buddha, who is omniscient. We can't say, look at our good life that we have now and sort of trace back the exact causes and when we exactly did them and how they were created and so forth. That is something which is an extremely hidden phenomena that only a Buddha has access to. So again, we have these sort of varying levels of objects. There are manifest objects that we can directly perceive through our senses and so forth. There are those hidden objects that we can realize in dependence upon a correct reason or a correct sign. An objectively impelled reason is emphasized here. And then there are those very hidden phenomena that we actually have to accept on the basis of the validity of scripture. We take a sign of faith. Actually, this is sort of like once you have determined that text to be reliable or trustworthy, one can then take the word of the Buddha on things that are very hidden phenomena. So here again, although we can know karma in general through objectively impelled reasoning, knowing the very details, the particularities, that's something that is a very hidden phenomena.
Yeah, that Katuji, Lu Tongue number gas, Kale Gamne, Sobolia, Tongue Yang Jun Sigora, Katubi Choji Chido, Kale Gamne, and Sobol Tongue Yang Chuba Sigora. Kadubji Lu Tungbes, Nambange, Rikin, Rimi Tungi, Rimi Tumbashangi, Debutada, Saber Sheba, Mimbatas. Oh, then the less up with Debu to Dimitu Kanga said to Maresura. Namge taking Debuni Chungur, Rimi Tungi means Rikin, the Rimi Tungi, never Kanga said to Mares, Sobo College Jabadigra. Namge taking Nambanges, Kaduji Luton, Nambanges. Luton Chava Meda to Sigara Namge. Taking Debuni Chungus Korangi, Namin Debutin Yons and Debutos Chondu, this were a Zawate. Taking Debuni Chungus. They do that Remiton Gilagi never can say to Maris or Remiton James. And then they did that Remiton by changing Debutada, Saber Sheba Mimberta, Katuki led Tomate. Kibu Tomate Tabu Kebangoji, Legend Debu Nyamso Nyonvese, Kale Jam Sobol Tonga Nyancho at the Neme Sabwa Debuchi, Nyodu Nyamso Nyove, Tunse Chon you at some savages, Chunguru Sedra. Namgate again Debuni Chungurus, Remitin James, Debu Nyamso Nyoane said the Kadu Luton, Nambangari, Remiton Debutada Saber Sheba Mimbata. Katu Giladi, Tonga Bango Giladi, Drebu, Namson, Chonse, number. What did this one? Yeah, teach it.
So here then it follows that one will not eliminate all homogeneous and heterogeneous results just through some specific torment of the body with austerities. Here one is not able to, by subjecting the body to some kind of experience of suffering, doing various austerities, be able to eliminate all of the varied different causes, or sorry, different results that come through the various karmas that one has accumulated. So, and that is the case because by experiencing, e.g., the example, or the example here, the torment that is the result of previous karma generated by austerities, one will eliminate only the fruition of some results which are lesser. So here, it's not the case that one is able to, by engaging in various austerities of the body, subjecting the body to various torments, that one could then eliminate all of the varied kinds of results that one the causes of which one has already accumulated. By engaging in a specific kind of austerity, one may be able to sort of lesser the results of some previous karma, but one is only really eliminating the result by lessening it. It's not as though one is able to eliminate all of the varied kinds of karma that one has created in the past through this practice of austerities. So it says one will not eliminate all heterogeneous results through some torment, though the result generated will be lesser.
No, yeah, Taniba. Niba Katuki, Leg in Nuban dressing Saber Sheba Kawasiba. Kale Gamne Kanga Nuba Samatam de so dress on the Chilu Chopune, and it Kale can pass Satu or this. Or Tendes Dipa Kagudo at a number. Chibubelu do sit in the Sujira. Oh, Katuki leg in Nuban dressing Saber Sheba Kagwanesa. Chide Katuki. Chide Kede Katuki. Titugin Drebu Naso Jimbe Nuba Chitu Dreber Cheba Yes, Legend Nuba Kangatsu Chitu Pung, so Samlin Chitu Pung. Anything it is Chibu the Pamel to the logical Chigapsona, any Drebu di Yomogo, Kawalamogo Chagres, Tindema Suyorno. Chide Kaduki Titugin Drebu Naso Jimbe Nuba Chitu Dreber Cheba Yes. Chide Kadum Nuba Dreba, Drechunani Tipa, Kalachi Janba Sassunani, Kasu Tandu de Sado, oh, to see order. Cheba Nuba Dreba Drebu, Chibu Tini, Ton Chig Yamsunya, Kalachi Jabategi, any leg in Debu Kangapa Sadu, Seven Euro Shenas, Debati Chera. kachi dobache. Mani teliata ranluke. What alle tipachuna dobate. Yeah.
So then we turn to refuting the idea that austerities combine the potencies of many karmas and eliminate them. So the opponent has this idea, well, what you should do is sort of combine all of one's previous actions, gather them together in a heap, and then engage in an austerity or some kind of practice that could eliminate the power of those karmas. So by getting all of those actions together, one could then engage in some kind of a practice that would be able to eliminate their results. So the opponent says, what austerities have a combining power to remove various suffering and pleasurable results? By this, when one experiences one torment, just that one result, which has combining power, will entail the elimination of many karmic results. So their idea is that, again, one sort of thinks of all one's karmic actions, gathers them together in a big heap, and then engages in some sort of bodily austerity with the purpose of eliminating all of those karmas that have been gathered together. So this is the kind of assertion of the opponent, where they're saying, again, what if you say what austerities have a power? By this combining power, there occurs elimination of the results of many karmas. Then there will be a response to that.
Oh yeah. Shena Shirva, Taralura. Kede Kadub Te Sura, Sobo Kalete Batege Sura, Lu Tungshin, Tungave Nyamole Shens, Lu Tungshin, Tungarchibe Nyamole Shen, Chimbadan, Sutimla Soba Kewa, Jabatazopa, Meva Soviore, Damaris, Tortigua, Chimbada, Sutimla Soba, Dodam, Toya Nyamoni, Toya Nyamo Korachibu Meva Sovreda, Chimba Sutimla Soba Kewa, Jabatazo Meva Soviore, Tortigua. Tambo da na se ta tege nyomo da ne chimba chutum la sokba tu kanga meba sogre se na tambo da na le de sebe che do menga temba da le ge de bu de nyom go se sebe che do ro ene menga temba la sokba to ase menga temba su de kale jabje cho shile me shi par ene nyima sabu kane shar chu ne menga su do ni kale jani sokbo kale shira nyangre do o teta leg never the sana some content to get to the yodo. Lende sebe to menga tembala sogbe to talk some button mebata. Tende kale mabu jaba de tonda meata sura. Supung ni meba de yona. Ane menga tengo me do tarab jiba kashe to sha tunga nyon shan pung shab de tiba se chuna degree wasugora. Tanyang machi tokba tabu nyomombe chashen gas. Kale jabe chashen gas, traton tunga yongurwa, ti chashe tabuchige, lende maluba pong nubese, sangmatam japan tugura, kira nubachidu, leganga nubachidu pong the tungachi nyambe pong tugu yunasigora. Oh, di saw nyomo change pong amse, nyomomba ti kale jabe changa shege, tadabuchi togbe pong amse, nyomo mebar kumbon jurse. Tuani dua tanda, tatanda ngazu tambu de la gueva. Amge trese, ye amge tres dua, nyomo change pon am sedera, yana serjira. Amge tre toye nyomo mebar, katubje lende kun pon nebar juatas. Kale jamugo se toye nyomo mebar, lula toye kale jamugo bar. Katubje lende, katubje lende, katubje lende kun pon juartas, ora katub jabateke legend bukun pon juartas. Katub de la le tamje niba chikdo debre chebe tuyi beche kale jade leg niba kanga de choche to pungne ente chama meba soega tuyi beche sigara. O tichi kuna ni chima ti chelongdo. Ti tawa de nyamdon rosa nyomo change pon am nyomo meba kumbon jur. Kedi kapdu nyomo le shen de nyomo mechenas. Ti wode gusa da digra, da shana digra. Yeah.
So here, then the response to this, that an austerity could, by combining the sort of a karma that one has accumulated, then be able to work against that to remove all of that karma. So Gyaltsab then responds to this by saying, you must assert either A, that austerities are other than just bodily torment, and the affliction of that suffering, and include generosity, morality, etc. Or B, that austerities are the affliction itself. So here, the first of these, if you take the first position, that austerities are other than just bodily torment, and you would have to include in the affliction of suffering, generosity and morality and so forth. So if A, it follows that it is pointless to strive intently for the sake of eliminating karma and its result through such torments as setting the five fires, etc. So the five fires is like basically creating a torment sort of situation where you would have fires lit around you on all four sides and the sun above, creating intense suffering. It would be pointless to do such austerities as that or torments as that, to strive to eliminate karma, because through some minor affliction, such as pulling out one hair, one will be able to avoid all the remaining results. So here again, if you're saying that you're able to sort of combine all of your karmas and then remove them through a particular austerity, you could say that then you could just remove them through a simple austerity like pulling out a single hair. That would then become logical if you're going to say that however much karma you sort of pile on, it can be gotten rid of by an austerity. So in the first case, you wouldn't need to make such a torment to engage in the elimination of karma. And then the word or in the root text means that it follows that without austerities that involve the affliction of torment, one will be able to abandon all karmas and their results, because an austerity has the power to combine into one all the potencies of all karmas. So if it's the case that you can combine the potencies of all karmas, then why would you even need to engage in a sort of torment to get rid of them if you can then apply whatever kind of antidote? So the root text then reads, we reply, you must assert that austerities are other than affliction, or that they are the affliction itself, which we will get to. If the former, then, through some minor affliction, one will avoid major suffering, or without affliction, one will abandon all karmic results.
Oh yeah, that did it. I'm the test at the Sabbason and Yammer. I'm the test you tama you do some Yamo Change Pon. Ya said, I'm the test. Don't Yamo Meba, Shitaki Kale Mega Temple so what in the Kale Jamugo chat. Katuji Lende Queen Ponivata. Tanda Kale Jabsha Kale Chunju Jabba take some of our pound you were you at the chess over Vasigora. Kale Shanda Jamugocha. Kadu de le tamje, Kadu Tanda Kale Jadigi, le tamje, never kanga so chick don't drain, never sort of doa, and if Shida Kale to Jamugoch and Tende so to Gravas at Sigdoa. Tadi did it. The Tachima Dana said, Shima de Dagi Joani says one. Oh, Tene Kavala so what is a kanga Kadu Meba so with it now. Don't you know ni say. Tunge nyong chege nyamo kukase ta tunge kechege le to so debu tunge changja de meba so gre base tire ta chima dra tunge nyamo kona meba so gre kewa to meba so mar sanasha kadub de le je neba chik don deba ta neba ragba sebar seba so so giro maimbar tas ene kale jaba de ke le je neba chik don deba seba ta neba ragba tamje to chikdu tomne sabar cheba soson giro maimbar tal sira ene kadub tene lenge jin debu imbe chela tende kale jaba de soson mege le sa san sobo de ko tunge nyongo sosha yosa Lenge be Debu Yon some Ravasi were. Kadu Tene Lenge Debu in Bicheris. Palangi Shingmo ala Sogba lessons. Palangi Shingmo Chikalesh Dayoride. Ko Tikbashanda Tayasik Omar Korangema Sasabe legend Debu Patini Pamasa de Orasura. Palangi Shingmo ala Sogba lessons. Oh, Tiri, Palabudua. Takoran Sulabudua. One Kera early teach you na Mangdagdua.
So here, then going back to this the word "or" in this root text, and so here it's referring to that if it is possible for you to sort of gather together karmic potencies that are then eliminated through an austerity, it's either the case that one doesn't actually need to do such a great austerity. You could do some sort of small kind of torment to the body, and that would eliminate all of those karmas if it's possible for them to be kind of gathered together, have that potency gathered together and eliminated in that way. Or you could even say that without affliction, one will abandon all karma, in that one could actually engage in something that's not really a torment, or like just has sort of a little bit of that to it. So it says the word "or" in the root text means that it follows that without austerities that involve the affliction of torment, one will be able to abandon all karmas and their results, because an austerity has the power to combine into one the potencies of all karmas. So again, it would, if that is the case, then you wouldn't really need to engage in such a painful kind of a torment, because you're able to gather that potency and counteract it with just a single austerity. But if that's not the case, if instead you say that the austerities are the affliction themselves, or sort of the suffering themselves, it follows that this austerity will not combine the potencies of all karmas, or even affect a rough elimination of their potency, etc., because that austerity is the result of bad karma, like the karma of a bullock who plows the field. So here, if it's the case that you're basically saying that the austerity, the suffering experience that one has, that torment during the austerity, is the elimination of that karma, well, then you're not able to say that there's a combining of all of the potencies, but rather you're basically just the suffering of that austerity is the ripening of the result of that karma. And so this then basically means that you couldn't have a combination of potencies eliminated through one single austerity, because basically the austerity, the suffering of the austerity, is the suffering result of a karma. And so you're going to have to go through and experience all of those in order to eliminate karma.
Yeah, that's all it is. Then the land incident, the Nuban dress or Jurma inside. Kadu de Kanatunga Noyade, Nemesa Bele, Nebe Debusam Noares or Legend Debusan in Becheris. This Sobukale Tabandi, Nuban dress or Jurma is Kadu de Legend Nebasama Chick to Tune, any Nebasamatam just Saber Chebas or some Jurtugmares. The Koran Dungan Neme Legend Debu Dungan Romado Tis and that's all I can Marasigora. Yeah. Teach it, this lamna. This ones.
Yeah, just so here then again the root text says if the latter, this austerity will not combine potencies because it is the result of karma. So again, it's saying that you have to assert that austerities are other than the sort of torment or suffering that one experiences, or they are the suffering experience themselves. If the former, then through some minor affliction, you could avoid a major suffering, or even without affliction, suffering, you could abandon all karmic results. And if the latter, that the affliction or the austerity is the affliction itself, is that suffering itself, then this austerity will not combine potencies because it is the result of karma. You're basically just the suffering experience that you are going through is simply the result of a karmic action, not the sort of combination of many actions.
Oh yeah. Taya chula budu akajo ona kerala ya chamso kombada. Chambada ninji kombala so lene tibada agrisi do akira. Tikpa se de simjang sawachene yongure. Chambada ninji kongwini tibada tapcho de kibare shigdo atika res ora. Ona kerala ya chamso kombada. Sunga deba so nga tinde mambo deba la so batinde. Ene tibada agrisi digdo atit tetan gegdo asena ora. Sunga deba le triba dabar deba dange la ase yang siba chomna le tada ya chombar gurwe le jinyembo meba gelo shenas ane tene le yang siba chomsona kera siba chomsona ane le tada ya chombar gurgere se lagudo ase gurwe le jinyembo chik meba le tada jinyembo chik me se ade gel songa shenas gore gelo shenas o tiji tuna debate.
So then the opponent comes back with a point that, well, you contradict your assertion that developing compassion, etc., and reciting dharanis purifies karmic obstacles. So here, basically the opponent is saying, well, don't you assert that certain practices like developing love and compassion and reciting mantras and so forth can act in a way to purify karma, to get rid of karmic obstacles. So therefore, are you not sort of contradicting what you have just asserted above? And further, when you destroy craving, you also destroy all karma. So you also contradict your assertion that there is no antidote to karma. So again, above where it's been arguing that there's not an antidote to karma, we can't exhaust all of our karma. They are saying, isn't there a contradiction here? Because you've said that when you destroy craving, when you get rid of that, you're also going to destroy all karma. So is there not a contradiction here?
Oh yeah, Taralurwa. Kaya Kyan Chakso Nam Gogbar Chebe, Dami Togbe Shirab Chuchen. Sawa Kaya Kyanam Go Chebe, said to Gudwa. Kaya Kyanam Go Chebe, Dami Togbe Shirab Tisgoda. Kaya Kyan Chakso Nam Gogbar Chebe, Dami Togbe Shirab Chuchen. Mao Bana Kevar Debe, Nyomo, Te Kebe, Legend Rebu Jimbala, no never Jurde, so Hotel New Grace. Kaya Kyanam Go Chebe, Tege Lela. New Jurgis, no neighbor Jurgis, that's all you know, no neighbor Jurgis. Maumba Kevaran Debe, never Chumbes, no negurete, Maumba Teta Kevar, Kevaran Debe, never, te, any Chumbeches, Tommy to Bashir of the Chumbeches, oh, teach it to.
So then the response to this is that the wisdom realizing no self, that which affects the cessation of attachment and any other flaws, has the destructive power to remove the seeds of results of karma created by that defiled desire for future rebirth. Because it destroys the faults of desire for future rebirth. So again, this then is saying in response to that the wisdom realizing no self, which has the power to cease attachment and any other flaws, has this destructive power to remove the seeds of results of karma created by that defiled desire for future rebirth, because it destroys that fault of desire. So looking at the root verse, which basically says the same thing, it's going to say, because has a power in relation to karma created by that flawed desire. Because it destroys the fault of desire for rebirth. So, this wisdom realizing no self has the power of cessation because it is able to destroy or get rid of that defiled desire for future rebirth and thereby eliminate karma created through that.
Oh yeah, that chidar cheben debu sharwa das. Mahubana yongju de tamito beshirajin gogi or mado. Tanda troops and gang legi debu tungeto tanda gobe kejmare sigoro. Chidar chebes ngar le cheben debu tata troops hawa sharwa mi shara imbata. Sobu gurbu shabala soba. Troops nyambar gua mayimbar thase. Chidar cheba nyambar juruse. Ngar chebe legi debu troops imba shawatan guala soba. Tezu nyambar gyurgi maare shigwar no, tami tubi shirage. Debu tu simba meje wari che mini beshin, debu tu simba de tu sara ko, maho bana yungir kagi yorba. Teshin do sungan deba soji, lejib gashin debu, debu nami mirung war che nuja, nga deba la soba tindegi ko, tikpa taya chidu kunu sangbochi nga deba yina, sungan deba soji, lejib gashi, Debu nami nyom mirwa ngema lesa shaba kanga nami chongru doyada gashi nami nyom go ba shada gashi nami chembu nyom go ba chongjun doyada soba tende yong de sigwa no teshen do sungan deba soje ledim gashi debu nami mirwa cheba da chongar joala soba so tende ne ba yo rese seba maban bar leta da seba chebe seba ke maban bar leta da seba chebe Sebar chene be nyembo ni soya meto se seba mabang bala tame magun bala ro ne seba de mabang ba do nyemo tamje da ni kyon tamje sebar chibe nyembo shanda kan yo mare se ro o de jikona de meto
So, here, then it continues by
o
saying that, well, again, this wisdom realizing no self, which acts as an antidote then to the seeds of future rebirth, does that because it destroys the fault of desire for future rebirth. So then the question sort of comes, well, how will it undermine such results of already activated karma as already exists, such as physical defects or crookedness? So it is true that there can be an effect if we engage in some kind of practice of purification, reciting mantras with a good intention, that we can affect the results of those karmas that are not yet accomplished, but something where it has already brought forth its result, like someone having a physical fault or someone's body being crooked. It's not possible to change those already established results. It's not possible through the recitation of a mantra to say make somebody's body straight when they had been crooked before, when that karma to accomplish that had already been established or is already in effect. So it follows that it will not. It's not the case that one is able to affect those the results that already exist. So because it follows that it will not, because it is unable to prevent the arising of results that already exist. Accordingly, by reciting dharanis, etc., one is able to render some karmic obstacles suitable to arise as a different result, in ripening, but without abandoning craving. No one has an antidote able to eliminate all karmas. So here it is possible through the practice of purification or doing other practices that one can reduce, sort of lessen the strength of the result of actions that have not yet ripened, but one is unable to affect those results that have already arisen. One isn't able to change something that has already ripened, and one is not able to, without abandoning craving, have an antidote able to eliminate all karmas. So without getting rid of that craving, there's no antidote that is going to be effective at eliminating all of our various actions or karmas.
oh yeah da de malo shena shunga me nyor mangi be le niba po adase shunga ma degirwa nyor mangi be le niba po ada chime nyonge ge dirbe yane shunga me seber pana ale ta de ta wa did ta ralu yana se shonga me seber pang ba ta se te chinje leje nami jimbe neba chungse ja meber che neba ten he se shonga ma de ta de sar do ke de neba chombe se kan kyo nam go se ba te ge la nyur ki se de ba da o te te ge ore se shonga me wa Kangba Tame Tanda, Chida Cheba Nyambar Juru said, Kangba Tame Seba Mabambar, Ngo Chebe, Le Tadagin Debu, Jimbe Neba, Nimi to Chem Niver Tandose, to Ralu Tisherwa, Shungame Yakaji, Shungame Nyar Mangebe, Le Toto, Lam Gombaso Tende Ponto Gurese, Chime Nyonge Gile, Kindebu. Pon mini bar chebane shungi ten mai des shunga ma dege shunga me nyar mange be le jin de ba de pon tu grese shunchi ma dege nyar nge be le shore te ne ba pon tu ma res cheba de de ma res kares ne shungi ten mai de rigbe jam mite des shinde shimbu to me topshi tsawe ko ne shakba chigi ne kon debu na mi nyo nge ba te ina mange ba na mi debu nyo me ko ba su jo res gordo Shinda Chambu Tomese, Topshi Sawe, Shakba Nyongi, Legi, Shakba Cheba Inasigora, when Sakbele to Kandikirti, Nimbu Topshi Sawe, Shakba Cheba Ina, Nyongi, Legi, number me by Jimber Tatu Grace, number Nyongi, Legi, number me by Jimbaya, and Tagbar Song by Tatu Grace Song Shas. 근데 nyonge da nyo mange bele ni shek do ate karesna ona nyonge so sheba da gelos na tenge mare shakdum majene nami neba to nyongo bele ina nyonge gile asire shakdum chene ta matwen yel chi yo mare singodo nyembo mache na nyonge be tanto son sos o dis kunani dubacheshna ya
So here then it says alternatively, the third, fourth, and fifth lines of this verse show that if there is an abandonment without craving, then after that, one will be able to negate the ripening of even the smallest karmic potency. And the last line shows that without abandoning craving, one will be unable to render karma impotent to bring about the results of any previously created karma. So some explain the third, fourth, and fifth lines as saying that one is able to abandon karma whose results one need not definitely experience, and the last as saying that one cannot abandon karma whose results one must definitely experience. So this is not the meaning of this of the lines of the verse here. So again, what it is saying is that when it comes to applying the antidote to a particular karma, one is able to, if we say do purification and engage in the practice of the four opponent powers and so forth, one can get rid of or one can lessen the effects of karmas that one has accumulated in the past. But here, it's not trying to say that. That if there is an abandonment without craving, then after that one will be able to negate the ripening of even the smallest karmic potency. That's not what's being said here. So some are trying to say that these terms of karma that is definite to be experienced and karma that is indefinite to be experienced are what are being talked about here. That one is unable to say get rid of the karmic potency of anything that is definite to be experienced, but one could say get rid of those that are not definite to be experienced, referring to those karma that are already activated. But that's not the proper explanation here. So the explanation is not the meaning of the verse and is not rationally acceptable, because it is said by many Mahayanas that a full confession with the four opponent powers prevents the ripening even of karma that one must definitely experience, and that it purifies one. And so, well, then the opponent comes back. Well, then this contradicts the idea that there is a karma whose result definitely must be experienced. And so the Mahayanas come back by saying that the meaning of definitely must be experienced is that the karmic result will definitely be experienced if one does not meet the antidote. And so otherwise, there would be numerous faults that would incur if one were to assert that there karma that is necessary to be experienced has no way to be affected by an antidote, and so forth. So here, what it means for a karma that will definitely be experienced is one that has not had an antidote applied.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geshe Thabkhe.
Oh
We
yeah.
will see you tomorrow, and thank you for that, and thank you, Katrina, as well.